I'm Corbett Wall with DB Auction, here with your cattle market summary for the week ending November the 9th, brought to you in part by VitaFerm GainSmart. VitaFerm GainSmart is a line of vitamin and mineral supplements formulated specifically for stocker cattle to keep them healthy and gaining. The GainSmart Stocker program is the best way to naturally reduce bulls and keep cattle eligible for natural value-added programs at the same time. VitaFerm GainSmart, healthy, efficient pounds. This market has really turned sour here in just the last couple of weeks, and we're starting to see it now that this is not just a bump in the road or a blip. This is going to take out most of the bullishness that we've been feeling we were working towards as we've been working through all these big numbers of market-ready cattle, and right now as we think that we were on the cusp of working downhill with lighter numbers, I tell you what, it's just really gotten tough. And now the packers have come in, and so some of them are putting in heavyweight discounts on the big carcasses after they led everybody in to producing so many of them. And so then that really took the legs out from some of the feeders, and it was most of your independent feeders that were trying to fight against all the ones that are lined up with the packers and 100% hedged. They were trying to, that was the way they found to get out, was buy those best cattle and that had a lot of go to them, and just feed them into a profit. If it took 1,600 pounds, fine, whatever it took to do it. But now where we've seen that threatening to go away, and it's just really getting tough, and there's not much support for all these feeder calves that are coming up there. A lot of them fleshy, some of them still unweaned, and just no support for those. Still a lot of those hitting the market, and we've just really fallen on hard times here. And now our box beef cutout values have peaked and on their way down. That's going to make it even tougher to deal with these packers. And I tell you what, I just don't see where our next ray of sunshine is coming from. And I know you guys hate it whenever I paint a gloomy picture, but I just tell the truth, and I talk to several other people out there too, and most everybody kind of looking at the same thing. But December live cattle last week started out on Monday down $1.75, and that really started the week out on a negative tone. Every time we start the week out with the board down hard, it's just hard to recover from that, and that's the way it was this past week. Tuesday was up a dime, Wednesday up 67 cents, Thursday up 45, and then Friday down $1.97, and then you're starting out your week on Monday on a down note on the board, and then Friday morning down hard, which promoted lower fat cattle trade on a cash basis. Your packers are just waiting all week for something to allow them to buy cattle even cheaper than what they've been buying them, which this market should be a whole lot better than this. And I've said it several times. That 6 weeks that we sat there at $1.11 when we should have been gaining $1 or $2 every week there, that just really took all the drive out of the market. And now then we had $3 higher there one week, and it looked like we might be steady or gain another $1 or $2 this past week, but it sure wasn't in the cards, and so now we're kind of headed back the other way already. February live cattle ended the week at $117.80. That was down $4.40. So now we're losing the premium that we've got out in front of us, which takes a little bit of the steam out of the market also on top of everything else. Go out to April, it's just at $120.25 now. Several months ago, it was way up in the mid 120s there, and a lot of us thought we'd blow by it and get to $130 on cash fats. That's not going to happen. You look at that April $120.25, and then you drop to June all the way down to $112.70, and that's how come these feeding calves are not bringing any more than they are, because there are a lot of health problems to get through. They melt on you. Their efficiency is not great. They're hard feeding. They're slow to come along. They quit on you a lot sooner than a yearling will, so you can't take them to those big gigantic weights that help you kind of feed your way into a profit. and then whenever you get done with them, it's going to take a little bit longer. You get into that June board, and you can't hedge them for anything, so it really makes it tough. Your feeder cattle contracts, November feeder cattle, Monday down $3 even on your feeder cattle. Again, that's just what takes everything out of you. Tuesday was up 47, Wednesday was down a nickel, Thursday up a quarter, and Friday down $1.17 with your November feeder cattle ending the week at 149 even. That was down $3.50. January feeder cattle 143.80, down $5.95. And just like on your live cattle contract, your out fronts are suffering the brunt of it, and it looks like we're kind of run out of steam here on this cattle market. Your fats, your cash negotiated fat cattle trade through Thursday of last week in your 5-area feeding region was 31,300 head, and they hadn't established a market. Once again, the Northern Plains just kind of played around there and sold a few here and sold a few there, and we never had any trade in the Southern Plains. We hadn't established a market, and we had sold 31,300 head. Well, we're not going to sell much over 100,000, so there you got about a third of the cattle have already sold without establishing a price. Gives all the leverage to the packers, and really makes it hard to trade with, and then they just slow play the market until late on Friday. They wait for something to happen, like the board being down hard that Friday morning, and then all of a sudden guys want to trade. But through Thursday there, we had sold some cattle up north from 111 to 114 and a half. Your weighted average price was 112.45 on steers and 113.21 on heifers. You wonder why this heifer weighted average is so much better, is because now we've got a major packer coming in here and discounting heavy carcass cattle. Now, what do you consider heavy carcass? Well, years ago it was 900, then it was 1,000, and it's 1050 now on a dressed weight carcass. 1050 is a huge carcass, I agree, but on your average dressed carcass on steers for the whole nation is around 900 pounds. So you start looking at some bigger cattle. I talked earlier about a lot of people thinking that they have to feed cattle to 1,600 pounds. 1,600 pound steer, 63% dress, that's over 1,000 pounds. So you figure a good percentage of those cattle on the average are going to weigh over 1050. Well, so guys, they get scared of those big discounts on those carcasses coming in, and so they start having to peddle those heavy steers at a lower price, which ends up making your heifers bring more on the average, because you can't get a heifer that big. You can, but she's a yield grade 5 for sure. But anyway, it's really messed up our trade here. But on the dress trade up in the Northern Plains, 178 to 180. Weighted average on steers there 179.58, and weighted average on heifers 179.98. So pretty much all of them at 180. Then Friday started. Remember, we still haven't established a market. So Friday came about, and then the board opened Friday morning down hard. So you started seeing a little trickle of trade in Texas, negotiated basis 115, quickly turned to 114. Kansas, there might have been a lot or two get 15, but then it went to 14. Okay, so now you're talking $1 to $2 lower. By the time the trade ended on Friday, we were down to 113. So you had a market that started out steady weak and then just got progressively lower as we went into it. Just like your dress trade up in the Northern Plains started out at 180 and then drifted down to 179. A lot of guys in eastern Nebraska were selling their big steers at 178, $2 back of the heifers, and just because of the big carcasses, they know they got them. The industry has led people into raising these big cattle, trying to feed some kind of a profit into them, and now they're taking their head off for that. And it's a rough deal there. Now your box beef cutout values appeared to have peaked last week and now fading back. Normally they go a little bit closer to Thanksgiving before they peak, but looks like we've already peaked because they were still going up early last week, and by the end of last week they were sharply lower. But on the average trade of last week, your choice cuts are still up 70 cents on the weighted average at 217.37. Your select cuts down 143 compared to the previous week's weighted average at 201.32. That's a choice select spread of $16.05, and a pretty decent movement there, 580 loads of cuts, grinds, and trims. But you look at your slaughter for last week, it was very respectable, 640,000, which was just 3,000 less than the big prior week, been 16,000 more than the same week a year ago. But now let's look at your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on Cattle Market Central ended the week at 149.05. During the week last week, it dropped under 150 into the 149s. That was the first time your real-time index had dropped under 150 since Labor Day. And so we were coming up good through the summer, late summer into the early fall there on your feeder cattle markets, but just all this pressure from all these big fat calves has really just taken the steam out of things. Your cash feeders and your auction markets, just like your real-time index, that 149.05 was down $4.21 from the end of the previous week, and your cash feeders and your sales sure $3 to $5 lower, and some calves sharply lower. Some places quoted calves as much as $15 to $20 lower. It's on those less attractive cattle, mostly your heifers, mostly your big fleshy calves weighing in your upper 6s and 7s. Mostly your unweaned types or short weaned types, and these buyers, they're just wanting more. They're having so much trouble with these cattle now. We've talked here in the last few weeks about these big calves coming in there, and they've grown so big so fast, they just don't have the wherewithal to sustain everything that they're susceptible to. And we talked about a Mack truck with a Volkswagen Bug radiator for lungs, and those cattle get sick and you can't save them. And they're not responding to medicine like they have in years past, and just a lot of guys running into wrecks. And you remember we got into the mud fairly early as the weather turned cooler, and cold, dry, clear weather, no problem. Cold, wet weather, that's a problem, and we've had our fair share of that already as we get in here pretty deep into the fall. But most of these outfits that are buying calves that will still feed calves, or maybe just buying calves to dry winter or background on some wheat pasture or wherever they can turn them out, they want 60 days weaned. It hadn't been that long ago. People thought 30 days weaned was a pretty good deal. Then that went away pretty fast. Then it was 45 days weaned. That's where you get into your VAC 45. That's just a program that includes vaccinated calves that are 45 days weaned. Now they want them 60 days weaned. They want these cattle hard, and if not, they just don't want them at all. And so it's hard to talk some of these guys, especially the ones that are spoiled and still remember the big prices there from 4 or 5 years ago, that they need to put in all that work and all that weaning. But if you want the big price, you're going to have to do it. And if this year doesn't teach cow-calf producers that they need to wean their calves, then nothing will, because the discounts have been so severe. And if this fall doesn't remind a lot of these calf buyers that whenever they're sitting at those big videos and they're all starched up and big shot and just windrowing all those calves, if this winter or this fall doesn't remind them that 90% of those calves are not weaned, they're ballers the day they load them off those ranches, then nothing will, because a lot of those cattle look sky high now. And they've had a lot of trouble with them. You put the vet bill on and the death loss and everything, and it just makes them where there's no prayer of them ever coming close to working. But pretty tough market around. You need to brace yourself for these early week high volume sales. They'll be sharply lower. They could be a foot lower. There's still some demand out there, but that they're going to want them at lower levels, guys, a lot lower. And now we're going to start seeing some of these farmer feeders that have gotten done with harvest. They're coming back into the market. We've had some really hard frosts. That will help guys come into the market a little bit more, but I don't think it's going to be enough until we get through more of these calves and the runs start to thin down a little bit more, and it may take till we get into the early next year. But let's look at a few quotes from late last week. St. Onge, South Dakota on Friday had some pretty high light calves there, about as high as we saw all week last week. 65 head of 485-pound steer calves bring 191. Down at the border, they have that Saturday sale in Santa Teresa, New Mexico. Had a big run of 1,800 head of mostly all steers, few spayed heifers coming across the border, and coming up north. They were $2 to $7 lower also. Look at the Cattle Market Central Market Report out of Santa Teresa there. You see on the most popular weights there, the 4-weight steers, 555 head of them, averaged 462 in the four-weight category at 167.84 on the weighted average. And just under 400 head of 5-weight Mexican steers averaged 533 pounds at 151.24. Another market there on Saturday, Fort Scott, Kansas. Watching on DV Auction every Saturday. That's our best Saturday sale that we have on there. But they're still getting a good price for those big steers. They'll push them hard and get them tied to that April board. 58 steers weighed 915 pounds at 151.75. That's a look at your week's markets from Home DV Auction office here in Canyon, Texas. We'll talk to you next week.